Shalom, Chavrim. James Trim here, and ready to start lesson 10, and the third parable of the book of parables, or also known as the book of similitudes, which is probably maybe a little bit better name in that the nuance that we have for the English, the connotations that we have in English for the word parable, don't really match the book. But if you look at the way the word parable is used, for example, if you pull out a concordance and look at the way it's used in the King James Version of the Bible, particularly in the Tanakh, not in the parables of Yeshua so much, but in the Tanakh, you'll see that this is the kind of usage that we see here. Okay, so we're in the third parable, starting in chapter we actually about to begin the third parable, starting in chapter 58. Now, in the subheading here, you'll see that I have the third parable, chapters 58 through 71, but actually, as you'll find, the third parable really ends at the end of chapter 64, and then beginning in chapter 65, we have an editorial insertion by Noah, the grandson of Enoch, who is the editor and redactor of this book. And so he's the final editor redactor, and he carried it on the, I say final, I mean, I'm not saying that there weren't scribal issues after that, but he was the editor and redactor of the book of Enoch, and he carried it on the ark, and his son Shem passed it to Abraham, and from Abraham to the Jewish people. Okay, so the third parable begins in chapter 58, and I began to speak the third parable concerning the righteous and chosen. Blessed are you, righteous and chosen, for glorious shall be your lot, and righteous shall be in the light of the sun, and chosen in the light of eternal life. The days of their life shall be unending, and the days of their set apart without number. Now, this is following up on the Son of Man material that we read about in the previous parable, whereby they have the chosen have received salvation in the name of the Son of Man, and this third parable will deal with the judge of the Son of Man as judge in the last days. And they shall seek the light and find righteousness with Yahweh Tzavaot. There shall be shalom to the righteous in the name of the eternal Yahweh. And after this it shall be said to the set apart in heaven, that they should seek out the secrets of the righteousness, the heritage of faith, for it has become bright as the sun upon the earth, and darkness is past. And there shall be a light that never ended, and to a number of days they shall not come. For the darkness shall first have been destroyed, and the light established before Yahweh Tzavaot. And the light of righteousness established forever before Yahweh Tzavaot. So this is the lot of the righteous, the destination of the chosen, the elect. So Messiah is the chosen one, and then these are the chosen ones. Or Messiah is the elect, and or the chosen one, yeah, and Messiah is the righteous one, and these are the righteous. Okay. Excuse me. Just like you have in Daniel chapter 7, where you have the Son of Man, and then you have the Kodashim that are associated with him. All right, chapter 59. In those days my eyes saw the secrets of the lightnings and of the lights and their judgment. It's talking about the angels and the fallen angels. And they lighten for a blessing of a curse, or a curse, as Yahweh Tzavaot wills. In other words, he sees their judgment. And there I saw the secrets of the thunder, and how when it resounds above the heaven, the sound thereof is heard, and he caused me to see the judgments executed on the earth, whether they be for well-being and blessing, or for a curse, according to the word of Yahweh Zavaot. And after that, all the secrets of the lights and lightnings were shown to me, and they lighten for blessing and for satisfying. Chapter 60. In the year 500, in the 7th month, on the 15th day of the month, in other words, this is on Passover. In Exodus 12:2, that became Nisan becomes the first day of the religious year, or the first month of the religious year. But in Enoch's day, this would be the 7th month, regardless of what calendar, or which, I won't say which calendar, which new year you're speaking of, because there's 2 new years in the Hebrew calendar. The Hebrew calendar is a cycle. And so each end of the cycle is an end of the year, because it's a circle, okay, bisected by the former and latter rains, or the fall and spring equinoxes. We'll talk about that more later. We'll probably get into some of that when we talk about the astronomical section. So in the year 500 of the 7th month, on the 14th day of the month, in other words, on Passover, in the life of Enoch. So is this the 500th year of Enoch's life? Enoch lived 350 years, so the 500th year of mankind. In that parable, I saw how a mighty quaking made the heaven of heavens to quake, and the host of the Most High and the angels, 1,000, 10,000 times 10,000, were disquieted with a great disquiet. And the Ancient of Days sat on the throne of his glory, and the angels and the righteous stood around him. And a great trembling seized me, and fear took hold of me, and my loins gave way and dissolved where my reins, and dissolved were my reins, and I fell upon my face. And Michael sent another angel from among the set apart ones, and he raised me up. And when he had raised me up, my spirit returned, for I had not been able to endure the look of the host, and the commotion of the quaking of heaven. And Michael said unto me, Why are you disquieted with such a vision? Until this day lasted the day of his mercy. And he has been merciful and long-suffering towards those who dwell on the earth. And when the day and the power and the punishment and the judgment comes, which Yahweh Zavaot has prepared for those who worship not the righteous Torah, and for those who deny the righteous judgment, and for those who take his name in vain, that day is prepared for the chosen a covenant, but for the sinners an inquisition. And on that day, there were let's pause for a moment. In other words, a renewed covenant or a new covenant. Verse 7, and on that day were 2 monsters parted, a female monster named Leviathan, to dwell in the abyss of the ocean over the fountains of the waters. But the male is named Behemoth, who occupied with his breast a waste wilderness named Duodain, on the east of the garden, where the chosen and righteous dwell, where my grandfather was taken up, the 7th from Adam. The first, that's an editorial comment right there by Noah, because Enoch is the 7th from Adam, and Enoch is the grandfather of Noah. So we have here little things that we can see are editorial comments by Noah that have been inserted. The first man whom Yahweh Zavaot created, meaning Adam. Okay. So this phrase, 7th from Adam, by the way, is quoted in Jude 1:14 in reference to Enoch. And I besought the other angel. Oh, let's pause here. We have a handout on Leviathan or Leviathan and Behemoth on 1st Enoch 60, and it's our first handout. So before we read further, let's go ahead and cover that material. There's a few references to Leviathan, and or Leviathan in the Tanakh, and I didn't go over all of them here. But I thought significant is Isaiah 27:1, where scholars tend to agree that Leviathan is a symbol or represents Babylon. And it says, in that day, the Lord, I just put the KJV here, Yahweh, with his sore and great strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Now, Leviathan, Babylon, in Isaiah 14, I think we may have covered this in an earlier handout. The king of Babylon is symbolic of Hasatan, and we're going to encounter the reference to the serpent in that context later in the third parable, or in Noah's actual appendix, if you will. If we look at the Targum to Isaiah 27:1, Targum Jonathan to Isaiah 21, the Targums were Aramaic paraphrases of the books of the Tanakh. It says, at that time the Lord shall punish with his great, mighty, and strong sword the king who has magnified himself as Pharaoh the first, and the king who has exalted himself as Sennacherib the second. And he shall slay the king that is strong as the dragon that is in the sea. So that's the symbolic meaning of Leviathan in the Targum. A last days ruler, probably synonymous with what we would call the anti-Messiah, or maybe the king of Babylon, who is Hallel or Lucifer in the KJV in Isaiah chapter 14. In the Talmud, there is a interesting tradition about Leviathan and Behemoth, especially since it ties in with their sex. Rabbi Judah said, in the name of Rav, this is Babylonian Talmud, Baba Batra 74b, and it's put it in your handout here. Rabbi Judah said, in the name of Rav, all that the Holy One, blessed be he, created in his world, he created male and female. Likewise, Leviathan, the slant serpent, and Leviathan, the torturous serpent, he created male and female. And had they mated with one another, they would have destroyed the whole world. What then did the Holy One, blessed be he, do? He castrated the male and killed the female, preserving it in salt for the righteous in the world to come. It is written, he will slay the dragon that is in the sea, and also Behemoth on 1,000 hills were created male and female, and had they mated with one another, they would have destroyed the whole world. What did the Holy One, blessed be he, do? He castrated the male and cooled or refrigerated the female, and preserved it for the righteous, for the world to come. For it is written, lo, now his strength is in his loins. This refers to the male, and his force is in the stays of his body. This refers to the female. And so this tradition is part of a body of traditions that indicate in Jewish tradition that in the last days, the body of Leviathan and in some cases the body of Behemoth would be served, the meat from them would be served in a messianic banquet at the end of the world, celebrating their demise. There's also a tradition here about Leviathan and Behemoth that appears in Midrash Rabbah and Leviticus Rabbah, 13:3, and that's also here in your handout. Rabbi Judah ben Simeon said, Behemoth and the Leviathan are to engage in a wild beast conflict before the righteous in the time to come. Whoever has not been a spectator at the wild beast contest of the heathen nations in this world will be accorded the boon of seeing one in the world to come. How will they be slaughtered? Behemoth will, with its horns, pull Leviathan down and rend it, and Leviathan will, with its fins, pull Behemoth down and pierce it through. Um, the So here they represent heathen nations, two heathen nations that will come into conflict in the last days. I think that may well correspond to, I think they do correspond to the king of the north and the king of the south in Daniel chapter 12, 11 and 12, I believe, with the king of the north representing Babylon and the king of the south representing um, Egypt. Really, in Daniel 12, this is sort of a last days bringing back, if you will, of a great conflict that happened over the centuries between the great empires of Mesopotamia and the generally Babylon, but whoever was in ruling power in that area, in the Fertile Crescent, if you will. Later to include a much larger territory that included Syria, and the king and the southern kingdoms and empires that came up around the fertile Nile Valley and Egypt. And Israel was always caught between these two great powers and was a strategic piece of land that was important between the two of them, and really got caught in the crossfire in the wars that raged between these two great empires, and as territory passed back and forth between them, depending on which one was waxing and which one was waning. Israel ended up, after its own rule was lost, being ruled by one or the other of them. This came up to the Maccabean period and the Alexandrian Empire that was divided up amongst Alexander's generals, and which resulted in the Seleucid Empire in the Greco-Syrian area of the north, and the Ptolemaic Empire in Egypt in the south. And for a last days correspondence, in my personal opinion, based on a variety of things that I have looked at, is that I think in the last days, I think Babylon represents the Christian nations. And there is a good deal of correspondence between the ancient Babylonian mystery religion and the customs and practices of modern Christianity. Christmas and Easter being the high feast days of both, i.e. the winter solstice and the spring equinox, and the customs and practices surrounding each of them. In fact, Easter is still called Easter after Ishtar. And many other customs and practices of Christendom can be traced back to ancient Babylon. On the other hand, I think Egypt then, the king of the south, and Egypt, where Israel was enslaved and were slaves, represents slavery and servitude, and Islam and the Islamic nations and the Islamic culture, if you will, which is one of slavery, if you will. Slavery is still practiced in some Islamic nations today. the only places that I know of that it's still really practiced. And the word Islam, well, the word Islam actually means servitude or slavery, and comes from salam, peace, but it's in the form Muslim. Muslim actually means a slave or a servant. They consider themselves slaves or servants to Allah, and uh, Islam basically means to surrender. Um, and so you can see the typology fits very well there with last days uh, nation cultures and the king of the north and the king of the south, and Babylon and Egypt, and therefore Leviathan and Behemoth in the last days. Okay, so let's turn back to First Enoch with that bit of insight that I've offered, and pick back up. We'll repeat verse 7. And in that day there were two monsters parted, a female monster named Leviathan, to dwell in the abyss of the ocean over the fountains of the waters. But the male is named Behemoth, who occupied with his breast a waste wilderness named Dudain on the east of the garden, where the chosen and righteous dwell, where my grandfather was taken up, the seventh from Adam, the first man whom Yahweh Zavaot created. And I besought the other angel, and he should show me the light of the monsters. So now we're back to Enoch speaking again. And verse 5, it was Michael spoke to me, um, uh, but verse 7 breaks into, actually verse 8 breaks into or includes a parenthetical statement by Noah. All right. And Enoch besought the other angel that she should show me the might of the monsters, how they were parted on one day and cast, one into the abyss of the sea and the other onto the dry land of the wilderness. And he said to me, you son of man, herein you do seek to know what is hidden. And the other angel who went with me and showed me what was hidden told me that the first and last in the heaven and on height and beneath the earth, in the depth and in the ends of heaven and the foundations of the heaven, and the chambers of the winds, and how the winds were divided, and how they are weighed, and how the gates of the winds are reckoned, each according to the power of the wind, and the power of the lights of the moon, and according to the power that is fitting with the divisions of the stars, according to their names, and how all the divisions are divided. We'll talk about that more in the astronomical section. And the thunders according to the places where they fall, and all the divisions that are made among them, the lightnings that may lighten, and their hosts, and that they may at once obey. For the thunder has places of rest, which are assigned to it, while it is written for its peal. And the thunder and lightning are inseparable, although not one, and undivided, they both go together through the Spirit and separate not. For when the lightning lightens, the thunder utters its voice, and the Spirit enforces a pause during the peal and divides equally between them, for the treasury of their peals is like the sand, and each one of them, as it peals, is held in with a bridle, and turned back by the power of the Spirit, and pushed forward according to the many quarters of the earth. Pause and wet my whistler. Okay. And the spirit of the sea is masculine and strong, and according to the might of his strength, he draws it back with the rain, and in like manner it is driven forward and disperses among the mountains of the earth. And the spirit of the hoarfrost is his own angel, and the spirit of the hail is a good angel. And the spirit of the snow has forsaken his chambers on account of his strength. There is a special spirit therein, and that which ascends from it is like smoke, and its name is frost. And the spirit of the mist is not united with them in their chambers, but has a special chamber. For its course is glorious, both in light and in darkness, and in winter and in summer, and in its chamber is an angel. And the spirit of the dew has its dwelling at the ends of the heaven, and is connected with the chambers of the rain, and its course is in the winter and summer, and its clouds and the clouds of the mist are connected, and one gives to the other. And when the spirit of the rain goes forth from its chamber, the angels come and open the chamber and lead it out. And when it is diffused over the whole earth, it unites with the water on the earth. And whensoever it unites with the water on the earth, for the waters are for those who dwell on the earth, for they are nourishment for the earth from the Most High, who is in heaven. Therefore there is a measure of the rain, and the angels take it in charge. And these things I saw towards the garden of the righteous. And the angel of Shalom, who was with me, said to me, these two monsters, Leviathan and Behemoth, apparently representing two last days nations that are in conflict with one another, both of which are monsters. And Israel is the chosen people, are innocent bystanders caught in the in-between. These two monsters, prepared conformably to the greatness of Elohim, shall feed. And when the punishment of Yahweh Zavaot shall rest upon them, it shall rest in order that the punishment of Yahweh Zavaot may not come in vain. And it shall slay the children with their mothers and the children with their fathers. Afterwards the judgment shall take place according to his mercy and his patience. So this is the last day's judgment of these two great cultures, probably the two great nations, but not nations like we would think necessarily a single country, but nation cultures, if you will, worldviews. The Islamic and the Christian, or the king of the north and the king of the south. My understanding certainly corresponds to the king of the north and the king of the south, and Daniel, the last portion of the chapters of the book of Daniel. And I saw in those days how long cords were given to those angels, and they took to themselves wings and flew, and they went towards the north. And I asked the angel, saying unto them, why have these angels taken these cords and gone off? And he said to me, they have gone to measure. And the angel who went with me said unto me, these shall bring the measures of the righteous and the ropes of the righteous to the righteous, and they stay themselves on the name of Yahweh Zepha'ot forever and ever. For your own study, you may want to look up Revelations chapter 11, verses 1 and 2, Ezekiel chapter 40, verse 2 through chapter 42, verse 20, and Zechariah chapter 2, verses 1 through 5, in reference to this idea of angels in the last day with their measuring instruments taking measurements. Okay. Chapter 61. And I saw in those days, sorry, I lost my place. We are in chapter 61, but we're in verse, we are in verse 1. Okay. And I saw in those days how long cords were given to those angels. No, we're in verse 4. Sorry. The chosen shall begin to dwell with the chosen, and those are the measures which shall be given to faith, which shall strengthen righteousness. And these measures, so the chosen people will accumulate and start to dwell together. Interesting prophecy. And these measures shall reveal all the secrets of the depths of the earth, and those who have been destroyed by the desert, and those who have been devoured by the beasts, and those who have been devoured by the fish of the sea, that they may return and stay themselves on the day of the chosen one. For none shall be destroyed before Yahweh Zevaot, and none can be destroyed. And all who dwell above in the heaven receive a command and a power, and one voice and one light, like unto fire. And one with their first word, and that one with their first words they blessed and exalted and lauded with wisdom, and they were wise in utterance and in the spirit of life, i.e., the Son of Man. And Yahweh Zavaot placed the chosen one of the throne of glory, and he shall judge all the works of the set apart above and in heavens, and the balance shall their deeds be weighed. So this is very, very interesting information. Now, we already identified in our last two studies that the Son of Man, the chosen, has four titles in the book of parables. He's the Messiah. He has five titles, if you will. He's the Messiah. He's wisdom personified. He's the Son of Man. He's the righteous one, and he's the chosen one. And so the Messiah is, it says, Yahweh Zevot placed the chosen one, or the Messiah, on the throne of glory. And he shall judge all the works of the set apart above in the heaven, and in the balance shall their deeds be weighed. So this is extraordinary. It says that the Messiah is placed on the throne of glory. He sits on the throne of glory. This gives whole new meaning to Psalm 110:1, and in how it fits together with Daniel 7:13, and how Yeshua is quoting them together, as we talked about in the previous studies. This is putting the Messiah in a much higher place than some modern Jewish thinkers would. And when he shall lift up his countenance to judge their secret ways, according to the word of the name of Yahweh Zavaot, and their path according to the way of the righteous judgment of Yahweh Zavaot, then shall they all with one voice speak and bless and glorify and extol and sanctify the name of Yahweh Zavaot. And he will summon all the host of the heavens, and all the set apart ones above, and the host of Elohim. And then he gives a list of three types of hosts that it's speaking of, and they are the cherubim, the seraphim, and the ophanim. Now that's kind of interesting, because the word ophanim means wheels, which gives a whole new dimension to Ezekiel chapter 1 and his vision with those wheels. Now, the other possibility is that ophanim means wheels, and that this should have been translated the cherubim, the seraphim, and wheels, meaning that the cherubim and seraphim are classes of angels and wheels are not. But I think the natural reading here is that the ophanim, the wheels, are actually a class of angels. And all the angels of power, and all the angels of principalities, and the chosen one, and other powers on the earth and over the water. This parallels Ephesians 6:12, where Paul refers to, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. On that day shall raise one voice and bless and glorify and exalt in the spirit of faith, and in the spirit of wisdom, and in the spirit of patience, and in the spirit of mercy, and in the spirit of judgment, and of shalom, and in the spirit of goodness, and shall all say with one voice, Blessed be he, and may the name of Yahweh Zevaot be blessed forever and ever. Of course, that reminds us of the blessing of the seraphim in Isaiah 6, and the blessing that is given elsewhere by the angelic hosts in the book of Enoch. All who sleep not above in heaven shall bless him. In other words, the watchers. And all the set apart ones who are in heaven shall bless him, and all the chosen who dwell in the garden of life, and every spirit of light who is able to bless and glorify and extol and hallow your blessed name, and all flesh shall beyond measure shall glorify and bless you, bless your name forever and ever. For great is the mercy of Yahweh Zevaot, and his long suffering, and all his works, and all that he has created, as revealed to the righteous and chosen in the name of Yahweh Zevaot. Now we get to chapter 62. We referenced chapter 62 in in last week's study. We jumped ahead a little bit to it because it was referenced by Boyarin in his book that we referenced previously as containing some of the most significant. Of course, we just read some really significant information about the Son of Man being on the throne of glory. And chapter 62 has some very high Christology, as they call it in academic circles. Puts the Son of Man in a very high place, and also correlates very closely with the idea of Yeshua as the Messiah that we have in the Ketuvim Netzarim, in the writings of the Nazarenes, known as the so-called New Testament. Chapter 62. And thus Yahweh commanded the kings and the mighty and the exalted and those who dwell on the earth, and said, open your eyes and lift up your horns, if you are able to recognize the chosen one. And Yahweh Zevaot seated him. Again, we repeat this. We saw it again just a minute ago. Yahweh Zevaot seated him on the throne of his glory, and the spirit of righteousness was poured out upon him, and the word of his mouth slays all the sinners, and the unrighteous are destroyed before his face. And there shall stand in that day all the kings and the mighty and the exalted and those who hold the earth, and they shall see and recognize how he sits on the throne of his glory, and righteousness is judged before him, and so no lying word is spoken before him. Then shall pain come upon them as a woman in travail, and she has pain in bringing forth when her child enters the mouth of the womb, and she has pain in her bringing forth. And one portion of them shall look on the other, and they shall be terrified, and they shall be downcast of countenance, and pain shall seize them, when they see that the Son of Man sitting on the throne of glory. And all the kings and the mighty and all possess the earth shall bless and glorify and extol him who rules over all, who was hidden. Back in chapter 48, verse 6, we talked about this, how the Messiah had been hidden away and concealed and kept, the Son of Man, like the Yayin HaMeshamar, kept from the time of creation, or as Revelation says, the Lamb that was slain from the foundations of the world, who was in the past concealed, but now is revealed. Verse 7, for from the beginning the Son of Man was hidden, and the Most High preserved him in the presence of his might, and revealed him to the chosen. Just like the Yayin HaMeshamar, the wine that was preserved in its grapes from the time of creation, which we talked about previously. So if you haven't been following, go back and watch parts 1 through 9, because this builds and builds and builds, and we learn things, and then we learn more things based on the things we learned before. Verse 8, and the congregation of the chosen and set apart shall be sown, and the chosen shall stand before him on that day. And the kings and the mighty and the exalted and those who rule the earth shall fall down before him on their faces. And now we're starting to see why in these last days, with things like gay marriage being legitimized by governments, abortion, of course, which is specifically addressed in the book of Enoch, and we will be talking about in future studies. Um, I don't think we'll get that far today. We might. I don't think so. But the governments of the world will face the judgment of the Son of Man, and worship and set their hope upon the Son of Man, and petition him and supplicate for mercy at his hands. Which is kind of interesting because we do still see them, many of the nations of the world, calling upon Elohim in their governments, opening legislative meetings and other types of meetings with prayers, and in other nations even calling upon their deities. All right, chapter 10. Nevertheless, that Yahweh Zavaot will so press them that they shall hastily go forth from his presence, and their faces shall be filled with shame, and their darkness grows deeper on their faces. And he will deliver them to the angels for punishment, to execute vengeance on them, because they had oppressed his children and his chosen. And we see that happening today. Not their punishment yet, but we see the believers, to whatever degree that they are believers, being oppressed for their beliefs. Verse 12, and they shall be a spectacle for the righteous, for his chosen. They shall rejoice over them, because the wrath of Yahweh Zevaot rests upon them, and his sword is drunk with their blood. And the righteous and chosen shall be saved on that day, and they shall never thenceforth see the face of the sinners and unrighteous. And Yahweh Zevaot will abide over them, and with that Son of Man shall they eat and lie down and rise up forever and ever. And the righteous and chosen have risen from the earth, and ceased to be of downcast countenance, and they shall have been clothed with garments of glory. And these shall be the garments of life from Yahweh Zevaot, and your garments shall not grow old, nor your glory pass away before Yahweh Zevaot. And as we've seen building up to this, and in this chapter, the chosen ones, the group known as the chosen ones, who are also known as the righteous ones, Messiah's followers, the group associated with him, the congregation of the righteous, are saved in his name, and whilst the sinners and the others, if you will, face horrible judgment, which is where we get to chapter 63. In those days shall the mighty and the kings who possess the earth implore him to grant them a little respite from his angels of punishment to whom they were delivered, that they might fall down and worship Yahweh Zevaot and confess their sins before him. And they shall bless and glorify Yahweh Zevaot, and say, Blessed is Yahweh Zevaot, and Yahweh of kings, and Yahweh of the mighty, and Yahweh of the rich, and Yahweh of glory, and Yahweh of wisdom. And splendid in every secret thing is your power from generation to generation, and your glory forever and ever. Deep are all your secrets, and innumerable your righteousness is beyond reckoning. We have now learnt that we should glorify and bless Yahweh of kings, and him who is king over all the kings. And they shall say, Would that we have rest to glorify and give thanks and confess our faith before his glory. And now we long for a little rest, but find it not. We follow hard upon and obtain it not, and light has vanished from before us, and darkness is our dwelling place forever and ever. For we have not believed before him, nor glorified the name of Yahweh Zevaot, nor glorified our Yahweh, but our hope was in the scepter of our kingdom and in our glory. And in the day of our suffering and the tribulation, he saves us not. And we find no respite for confession, for our Yahweh is true in all his works, and in his judgment, and in his justice, and his judgments have no respect of persons. And we pass away from before his face in account of our works. And of all of our sins are reckoned up in righteousness. Now they shall say unto themselves, our souls are full of unrighteous gain, and it does not prevent us from descending from the midst thereof into the burden of Sheol. In other words, we can't buy our way out of hell. And after their faces shall be filled with darkness and shame before that Son of Man, they shall be driven from his presence, and the sword shall abide before his face in their presence. And of course, that sword represents the Torah, the word. Verse 12. Thus spoke Yahweh Zavaot, this is the ordinance and the judgment and the respect to the mighty and the kings and the exalted and those who possess the earth before Yahweh Zavaot. Chapter 64. And other forms I saw hidden in that place. I heard the voice of the angel saying, these are the angels who descended to the earth and revealed what was hidden to the children of men and seduced the children of men into committing sin. And this is referring back to the material that we began with at the very beginning of the Book of Watchers. Okay, we've gone 46 minutes, 47 minutes. However, if we move into chapter 65, I'll just give you a little bit of a preview, and then we're going to pick back up on this next week. So this will be a relatively shorter study than some of them, but I don't want to get into chapter 65 and moving forward from that, because then we begin we've really ended the third parable here, Enoch's third parable, and the speaker will completely shift. Verse 1, in those days Noah saw the earth, that it was sunk down, and its destruction was near. And he rose from thence, and went to the ends of the earth, and cried aloud to his grandfather Enoch. And Noah said 3 times with an embittered voice, hear me, hear me, hear me. And I said to him, tell me what it is that is falling out of the earth. So there's a shift in speaker, though, because it'll shift over to Noah being the speaker. And this meeting between Enoch and Noah sort of serves as a sort of transition of speaker. We're going to therefore stop here, and we're going to pick up next week with chapter 68, I believe. No, 65, chapter 65. There's some really deep material coming next week, so I hope you'll join us. We're going to get into much more in-depth information about the fallen angels, the Nephilim that we learned about in the Book of Watchers. Now Noah, in his parenthetical section here, is going to revisit that issue, and he's going to talk about it more in depth. And we're going to find out about 5 leaders of these fallen angels, of the 200 fallen angels. There are 5 leaders known as Satans. We're going to find out how we talked about earlier in chapter 40, and we're going to cover it again, that the word Satan actually means adversary. We got a little extra time here, so I'm giving you some previews of what to look forward to next week. There's 5 Satans, not one. 5 Satans. The word Satan means adversary, and there's 5 adversaries, 5 leaders of the fallen angels that we read about in 1 Enoch 6 and Genesis 6. And there is one who's probably a leader of them all that we know of as Hasatan, and he's actually one of those. And we're going to find out more about that next week. And we're also going to find out more about the oath that they took. that we read about at the beginning of this book in First Enoch chapter 6, that they took on Mount Harmon. They took an oath that bound them together, and we're going to find out about this oath that binds them together and the chains that bind them and the power that binds them in a certain name. Okay? And all of that is in the conclusion of the book of, well, I think we'll conclude the book of parables next week. We'll see if we have time to go through all of that material in 1 week. We may not, but we're going to go through as much as we can next week in lesson 11. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close off lesson 10, and I will see you again next week. Shalom, everybody.